African National Congress leader Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed his well wishes for the former liberation movement in its 114th year since inception. Ramaphosa also paid tribute to the forebearers and founders of the party, saying members need to take forward their legacy of working for the people. The ANC leadership is holding cake-cutting events across the Northwest ahead of the formal celebrations on Saturday. Behind these festivities, the party still continues to grapple with redefining its identity after losing its electoral dominance that saw it piecing together a grand coalition to stay in government. To unpack the significance of this day and everything in between, let's chat with political analysts Asanda Ngoasheng and Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. A very good afternoon to both of you. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. 114 years later, what can we say defines the African National Congress today? Asanda Ngoasheng.
Thank you so much for having me, Vuyo. Unfortunately, the initial legacy of the ANC was one of a liberation movement for Black people, by Black people, staffed by some of the most intelligent people in South Africa who at the time had even studied internationally. Now we have a political party that whose brand has become about corruption, has become about ineptitude and lack of service delivery, which is really sad when you consider the beautiful, amazing, and really powerful legacy that it has when you look at its history all the way from 114 years ago.
The reason I started there, Prof, is precisely because in his speech earlier today, the ANC president spoke a lot about the history of that organization and how the cadres of that organization should emulate their forebears, something which, of course, we're not seeing a lot of today, as Asanda Ngoasheng just said.
Absolutely, Putvoyo. In fact, first of all, I would say we should congratulate the ANC for reaching this milestone of 114 years of existence. It's something commendable. But as Asanda was saying, the ANC is the opposite of what we have known it for. That is an organization that was pro-poor, pro-Black, and a progressive movement. Right now, we have an organization which is led by people who are self-centered, basically characterized by egocentrism, and of course, not thinking about the same people who have placed them in those offices. So it's an opposite of the ANC that we have known all along. If anything, the ANC should be ashamed of itself, even when the president talks about the likes of Moses Kotane and the like. He should be ashamed of himself and should be ashamed of the leadership of the ANC for having basically undone everything that was put in place by the forebears of the organization who put people first, the point that Asanda just mentioned. So it's a disgrace, it's a shame, it's an embarrassment.
What happened, though, Asanda Ngoasheng? Where did the wills come from? Is this something that happened over the past, 32 or so years, or is it something that perhaps was there all along, but perhaps that we didn't see much of, precisely because for many, many years, for decades actually, the organization was banned. It operated largely in exile. Its leaders were on Robben Island, or those who had to mobilize internally, were oppressed like everyone else, like every other Black person who was in South Africa at the time. What actually happened and when?
Well, I think the problem started happening in post-apartheid South Africa, where the ANC was captured by capital effectively and became the very capitalists that they despised and began to be part of the fabric of extractive capital and extractive practices in South Africa. I mean, we talk about South African mining right now, and we talk about an industry that has had some transformation, but this transformation has not led to more royalties. It has not led to more state, more state control or even more state capacity because of it is now black people owning these things and no longer white people as it was in the past. As South Africans, we believed, we hoped, we thought that when the ANC took over, that they would change the fortunes of this country and that the minerals of this country, whether you're talking gold or platinum or any of the other newly critical minerals, would be to the benefit of South Africa. And that has not been the case. Instead, what they have done is they have ensured that even those who do pay taxes, those who do contribute, and the royalties that do come, that they corruptly take them out themselves. When we talk about some of the biggest challenges facing South Africa right now, the ANC is in the middle of it. Illegal mining. The first mine that was illegally captured used to belong to ANC-related people. And then that was Aurora. And when we talk about, the capture of the police, ANC people at the helm we're being told that they were receiving, 500K in bags. We're being told that ANC leaders were receiving Louis Vuitton bags. We're being told that, they effectively were the ones who were at the forefront of any and every extractive, illegal, and corrupt practice that was to the detriment of South Africa, which is the opposite of what they have been placed, to do. And if you look at the era, particularly between Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa, is the most horrendous era. So it's not to say that during the Mandela era and the Thabo Mbeki era, there wasn't corruption. There was corruption, but it's grown quite exponentially, particularly under the Jacob Zuma era, where we saw the Zondo Commission told us there were numerous attempts at state capture, some successful and some not as successful as those who wanted them to be.
From where you sit, from your vantage point, Prof, where did the self-centeredness, the egoticism, and other ills that you were talking about come from?
It's a combination of factors. First of all, one point that we need to reiterate, which Asanda just referred to. During the liberation struggle, we were hopeful that once the ANC ceased to be liberation movement and became the governing party, it will have the interests of the people at heart. This was never to be. Ask yourself the question, how did people suddenly become rich when they were in exile and came back having nothing? Suddenly they had mansions. Where did they get the money from? That is where the first problem started. And then, of course, we'll ask who funded them and for what purpose. We'll recall that until 1993, the ANC still believed in socialism and still believed that there was no space for the institution of traditional leadership, and still believed that women would not be accorded the same status as men. Until there was a meeting that happened outside Pretoria in 1993, that's where those issues were revisited. Then the ANC realized that following the fall of communism in Russia in 1989-1990, then there was no room for socialism in a capitalist world. So they changed that policy, which is why even some of the so-called socialists are in fact more capitalist than you and I. That is the reality we are faced with. And then secondly, that is also the reason why the chapter on traditional leadership is the shortest one in the Constitution. In case you didn't check it, you can check after this interview. It is the shortest chapter because it was an afterthought. After realizing that if you did not bring the traditional leaders on board, you stood a risk of losing the first election in 1994. Then we had to embrace traditional leaders and then, of course, accord them the status which was ill-defined. Then in terms of people amassing power, the word or the phrase was, it's our time to eat. And that is exactly what is happening. Whites ate under apartheid, now it's our turn to eat. Unfortunately, when whites were eating, you would give them 10 rand to provide services, they would only eat 2 rand and then ensure that 8 rand is used to the communities. Right now, the opposite is true. They eat anything between 8 rand and 9 rand, and if you are lucky, 1 rand will go to the communities. And this has become worse in each and every election, as Asanda correctly pointed out. That is the reality we are faced with, unfortunately, and it's not going to get any better.
Now, for the longest time, Asanda, ANC leaders denied or dismissed suggestions that it wasn't doing as well as they thought they were doing. Of course, the last national and local government election was quite a shocker, even though many people saw it coming and had actually warned the ANC about it. Do you think that there is now, or there has been, a rude awakening and the party is actually ready to mend its ways?
I don't think that the ANC can ever have a rude awakening. The ANC believes that, that it told us it will govern. They told us they would govern until Jesus Christ comes back. And that level of arrogance has not gone down at all. And the level of humility that we needed to see after they lost and only received 40% of the electorate was non-existent. And the other problem is that you are dealing with an organization that is now institutionally corrupt. It's no longer individuals who you can point to and say, those are the bad apples. The entire institution is now rotten. Whether you're looking at the fact that, the ANC and other political parties, by the way, have policies where people who are members of parliament have to pay money over to the political party. So when you do that, you're creating a corrupt class because you are denying people their full income, which means they're going to do what? They're going to go out and find ways to fill that gap. If you look at the fact that the ANC itself as an organization, Luthuli House has sheriffs banging down its door, it's failed to pay its own employees. It tells you the level of rot and the level of dysfunction that this political party is under, despite continuing to win elections. I think for me, what's most concerning is that even as the ANC dies, because it's got 40% and we don't know, how much further down it's going to sink in 2029. But even as it sinks, what scares me is that the politics of the ANC, the toxic politics of the ANC, the corrupt people of the ANC, those who were in the Zondo Commission have found ways to come back and be members of parliament and be in our body politics. So even as the actual ANC, black, green, and gold, is removed, the toxic policies, the corruption, and the human beings that are a poison to the system of South Africa continue. When you look at the MK and who is in the MK now, those are former ANC cadres who are in the list of Zondo Commission accused. And so even if the ANC was to die, we are in a situation now where they have institutionally embedded themselves so much that to get rid of the corrupt, the toxic, the selfish kind of ethos that this political party has brought to South Africa is going to be very difficult. So we may well get rid of the ANC, but still be left with ANC-like policies. Because if you look at who has the vote now, the ANC only has 40%, but you've got the MK, which is an ANC baby. You've got the EFF, which is an ANC baby. You've got, I could list the multiple political parties that are governing this country coming from the ANC and continuing the toxic politics and the corruption that they learned in the ANC.
Notwithstanding what Asanda Ngoasheng, or everything that Asanda Ngoasheng just said, Prof. Cyril Ramaphosa seems to believe that renewal, which is, of course, one of the big buzzwords, is indeed possible.
Well, let us be honest. The ANC has gone further down under the so-called New Dawn. Look at the results of the 2019 general election, where the New Dawn had already been announced, because immediately when President Ramaphosa ascended to the stage as the president of the ANC and the president of the country on the 15th of February 2018, he went to Davos and he told the entire world that there were 9 wasted years. And then he also said that he was coming with the New Dawn. A lie he told together with Emmerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe, where they were talking about the New Dawn. I asked the question, but where were you all along? Were you not part of the establishment? And in the South African context, if you are the deputy president of the country, you are also the leader of government business. So that means if there is accused number 1, you are accused number 1 as deputy president, and the sitting president is accused number 2. I even wrote an article to that effect, which I'll be happy to share with you and Asanda, which was published in one of the international journals, where I was saying that The reason we have a policy conference before an elective conference is so that after we've agreed on the policy positions, you then elect people who are going to implement those policies. Whether you elect Bheki Mngomezulu, elect Asanda Ngoasheng, it doesn't really matter. We'll be implementing the same policies. So if Asanda was the president and then she's forced to resign, as it happened with former President Zuma, and then I ascend to the stage, where do I get a mandate? Where do I derive mandate if there is no special conference? It means I'm implementing the same policies that guided Asanda's leadership. So you cannot then talk about the new door. So basically the problem is that we were fooled in a way. We were promised one thing and then the reality pointed to a different direction. And the same applies to this renewal agenda. It's political rhetoric. We're told that the party is renewing itself, but factionalism continues. In that article, I even provided statistics proving that the corruption index has worsened under Ramaphosa's leadership than it was under Zuma. And I was not just making up the figures, I was producing the figures with the references so that anyone who wants to check can go and check those figures. So we're getting worse by day, and then under the guise of the new dawn and the 9 wasted years.
Cyril Ramaphosa will be delivering a speech on Saturday to the party faithful, giving them their marching orders, as Fikile Mbalula said the other day. If you were him, or you were able to advise him, what would you say to him, Asanda Ngoasheng?
Well, I think the first thing they can do is what the city of Johannesburg managed to do ahead of G20, which is to speed up service delivery and be visibly as much as possible. And I think one of the most critical things that the ANC fails to understand is that corruption is not a victimless crime. And while it may for a long time seem like nothing is happening because people were corrupt, eventually it catches up. I'll give you this anecdote, Vuyo. I was in Seshego in Limpopo this December, and I got sick because the water in Seshego hasn't been cleaned, isn't getting cleaned properly. My family members in Eastern Cape, in Tanzania, got sick because the water there hasn't been cleaned and isn't being cleaned properly. So we are now in a state where we are facing the collapse of our water system. South Africa used to be one of the countries that had the cleanest water in the world. We literally had awards for this, and you could drink our water out of the tap without any stress. We are now at a state where people across South Africa have to buy water if they want to be guaranteed that the water that they drink is not going to make them sick. I mean, the idea that we're living in a country where even if you boil the water, it's still not going to remove the impurities. It tells you the level of degradation that we have sunk to. Meanwhile, we know article after article has come out telling us that the Saudis of this world and various other people connected to the ANC have been in charge of water treatment plants and failed to do their job. But they are not in jail. Their assets haven't been taken, or at least not all of them, and very little, if anything, has happened to them. And so for as long as this continues, the ANC is going to die. And eventually, people are also going to get rid of even those politicians who have left the ANC and are now in other political parties if they continue this toxicity. And so for me, the most important thing is to tell people that it's a life and death situation now. It's no longer a pleading because, oh, comrades, we have to do right. You are literally killing people through dirty water as the ANC, as the government, and you need to stop. And you need to be able to ensure that when people open a tap, that water will come out that is drinkable. Oh, and by the way, also make sure that all those villages where taps were put in and have been dry for more than 10 years, that you figure out a way to reconnect that. Because what the ANC and its cadres are now doing is messing our water systems so that they can get money through tenders for water tanks, which is absolutely atrocious behavior, because those same people's relatives are going to die because of the same dirty water.
Cyril Ramaphosa and other ANC leaders have been saying that it's a matter of life and death, as Asanda Ngoasheng was saying, Prof. But that doesn't seem to have moved the needle. What will change this time around if indeed he gets to, which in all likelihood he will, repeat that message?
Putvoyo, let me start off from where Asanda left off with the dirty water. Asanda is better because there is dirty water. Where I come from, there is no water at all. When I'm at home, I make it a point that I visit as many communities as possible. I went to places around Jozini local municipality. I visited places around Umhlabalengana local municipality. It's a terrible situation. Jozini Dam is full to capacity to the extent that one of the gates had to be opened and people's maize fields and then a lot of other plants that were there had to be washed away. That is how much water we have. What we need is what we lack is leadership. There is no leadership. Water goes straight to the ocean, and there is no one who's trying to do anything. So the best way to change this would be for the ANC, first of all, to have humility and go back to the electorate and say, we have messed up. That is the first step. We have messed up. You trusted us, and we have let you down. That is the first step. Then secondly, the ANC leadership and membership must be willing to accept constructive criticism. Whenever the likes of Asanda and myself make critical statements, we are labeled as enemies, and those who are within the organization are labeled as anti-revolutionary. I told former President Thabo Mbeki when I hosted him in my institution, that former president, whenever you make statements, you are described as someone who is anti-revolutionary. And those of us who are making similar statements from the sideline, we are labeled as people who are anti-progressive forces, and therefore we are enemies of one, the ANC, and then the government, which is blatant lies, because all we do, we put the country first, and then everything else comes second. But politicians don't like that. So the first thing then will be humility, and then the second one will be to agree that things have gone wrong, and then thirdly would be to list a couple of things that the party has identified as stumbling blocks, and then lastly, indicate how we are going to act on that. I had advised them, by the way, before the 2024 general election, and said there were 5 things they needed to do, failing which they were not going to get 50%. As they say, the rest is history, because I was described as a Zuma man just because I was being critical, and then they labeled me as a Zuma man. And then look at what happened. They got 40%, at least according to official results. Others are questioning even the 40%.
In the minute that we have, or so that we have left, I want to ask both of you as to whether you think the ANC's future is brighter or bleak, given the entrance of such parties as your MK party, given the fact that it now has to co-govern with parties it says it doesn't agree with, like your democratic alliances. We look at what is likely to happen in KwaZulu-Natal now, which is where the government of provincial unity may just collapse. We've seen how the National Freedom Party has asked its sole member, who is also an MEC, to actually withdraw from the government of provincial unity, which means that things may just erupt. From where you sit, Asanda Ngoasheng, what do you think is going to happen? Is the ANC life going to be easier or just more difficult?
I think the ANC is a dead political party. And if I was a leader of the ANC, I would be spending the next 5 years, or at least the years up until 2029, preparing to kind of create a narrative around the legacy. I would be wrapping things up and ensuring that whoever is going to come into power is going to at least have an understanding of the solid base and foundation where the ANC did good, compared to just, pretending as if they are not dying and pretending as if things are not running away from them. And but the unfortunate matter of it is that the ANC is so arrogant. They won't do that. And that is sad for me, because despite everything we've said here, the ANC did lead South Africa from apartheid into democracy, and did lead for a good 15 to 20 years, and did take this country to heights that we never imagined we could get to. But somewhere along the line, they lost it. And because of that, they lost the people. And those people are not going to come back. As I've said, if I'm getting sick because of water, if my relatives are getting sick because of water and we now have to pay for water, there's no way any of us are going to be voting for a political party that's going to make sure that that continues and make sure that the people who made that happen are, unpunished in any way. So it's dead.
Quick last word from you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Vuyo. Indeed, the future of the ANC is bleak. And it's bleak for a number of reasons. One, you look at the constituency, the majority of the voters are now young. Those youngsters don't care about the ANC having liberated them. They were not there. They are only assessing the ANC based on the problems that Asanda is referring to. They are assessing the ANC based on what I have just outlined, where we're a voter, but it's not reaching the people. And the list goes on. And then secondly, until the ANC humbles itself and then is prepared to self-correct, we have a problem. But unfortunately, we can't do that with the caliber of leadership and membership that is arrogant, as a point we have just emphasized on several occasions. Until you do that, then the ANC is doomed. Then the last point, of course, has to do with the mushrooming of political parties. Until we do a constitutional review, and not a constitutional amendment, until we do a constitutional review and put a cap on political parties, there is no way that there will be an outright winner. So it means we are now stuck with coalition politics. And under this coalition government we have right now, the ANC has proved that it has no idea on how to lead a coalition. Based on those and many other reasons, the future is bleak.
Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, Asanda Ngoasheng, let me thank you both for your time and insights. Really appreciate it.